So I have one of the members of the Los Angeles Guitar Quartet with me, William Kanengiser. Welcome, William.
It's great to be here.
Well, it's so wonderful to talk with you after having admired the quartet for many, many years and shared some of your recordings with our listeners as well. And we're here to talk about a new recording that you have out now, which is really so full of color, so full of light, and the title gives a clue as to what that theme is. And the title of the album is Opalescent,
Yeah.
which is a word that not everybody, uses in everyday conversation. I wonder if you can tell us about the idea behind this album and what it's all about.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you picked up on this idea of light and saturated color and reflection. And because that's sort of the theme of it. It's a collection of pieces by different composers who all sort of ruminated on this idea of the intersection between sound and light vibration. And specifically, a composer from Australia named Philip Houghton, who was a synesthete. And so he was able to, when he heard musical tones, he saw very specific colors. And he wrote a suite called Opals, which portrayed three different kinds of opal. And opal is the sort of national stone of Australia. And his idea was to have the music very specifically, depict the colors and the little glints of light that as you rotated an opal would shine through the stone. And so this character of opalescence is a kind of luminous vibration that a stone can have, where you feel like the stone itself is emanating color. And in a way, that's what we hope people take away from this recording, that it's kind of mysterious and mesmerizing, but it's sort of welcoming in the same way. And so it's all quote unquote modern music, but extremely accessible, groove oriented, and hopefully, ultimately kind of uplifting.
Well, I find it to be fascinating to listen to, especially given the fact that you've got these different composers that are working sort of in the same medium. They're playing with colors, they're playing with, the light, to use a metaphor, of the music. And one thing I even notice, like in your playlist here for this album, is it begins and ends with music on the same note, right? There's a D that you start out
Yeah.
with, that first piece by Andrew York, and then the last piece by Philip Houghton that you mentioned ends with a little D kind of trailing
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
It's sort of coming full circle.
That was not planned.
Yeah. Well, what was planned as far as the album goes? I mean, was the Philip Houghton piece sort of the touchstone for you, and you grew it from there?
Literally the touchstone. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were lucky to have, met and become friends with Philip Houghton. He passed away about 2 or 3 years ago. In fact, in the liner notes, there's a photo of us with him in Sydney, and he's holding the actual opal that inspired him to write the piece. He brought it to us. We were right in the shadow of the Sydney Opera House, actually, where we took that picture. So we had played his piece for quite some time, and then it was, I think, with many of our recordings, it's that we're drawn to certain pieces, we're playing them in concert for a while, and then a collection or a theme or an album sort of forms itself, and then once it started to coalesce, it was like, okay, well, what other things could work with this? And then it sort of all came together in a sort of happy way. um, some
Yeah.
of them are, there's one particular piece, the opening track we played years ago, written by our former bandmate Andy York. It's called Hidden Realm of Light. And so that's a piece that existed way before. And then there's a world premiere recording of a new piece written for us by Robert Beezer. So that it wasn't so planned out, I would say.
Yeah.
It all kind of worked.
Well, speaking of music written for you, there's also a piece on here called "The Sweet Transcendent" by Tillman Hopstock.
Yes.
Somebody's trying to call you there, right?
Yeah, hold on. I'm trying to see where I left my phone. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Oh, it's over here. Yeah, I need to mute that. It's my wife texting about our puppy.
Oh,
Sorry. So
nice,
that's allowed.
nice.
Anyway, sorry.
So, the Sweet Transcendent was written for you in 2015, I
Yeah.
think. This is by Tillman Hopstock. It's a really fascinating piece. There's kind of like a little bit of Baroque sensibility to it, you know. It has this kind of like classical sound, but it's also very modern. I wonder if you could put that in context for us and talk about this work.
So Tillman Hopstock is a sort of legendary guitar virtuoso from Germany. He lives in Darmstadt, and he's also an eminent Bach scholar, and he's a dear friend of ours. And he's also a wonderfully eccentric guy. And one of the things that he became well known for was he he came up with a record of newly discovered works for solo guitar by a composer named Alan Wilcox, and he discovered this guy who was essentially a contemporary of Debussy, who lived in England and wrote these very ambitious works for solo guitar in this sort of impressionist style. It was almost as if Debussy himself was writing for guitar. And he recorded a whole series of preludes, and then he discovered a set of etudes by the guy. And come to find out that Alan Wilcox never existed. This was someone that he dreamed up in his head. And he didn't just like make up a name. He wrote an entire biography of the guy. He had pictures of him at his school, and here's his dad, and it was
Yeah.
really pretty funny. And then finally, the cat was out of the bag, and people were like, "There's no Alan Wilcox. It's just Tillman." But so at one time we were talking with Tillman, and we said, "Gee, I wonder if we could discover a piece for four guitars that Alan Wilcox wrote, and said, let me think about it. Let me see if we can find out. So, and it's a very unusual piece in our repertoire because it's written essentially in an impressionist style, but very pictorial. Like each of the movements, it's almost like a pictures at an exhibition kind of idea. That one is called in French, the Grand Cathedral, or a breath of wind. It's very filmic or pictorial in an impressionist way. And it was an honor to have him write this for us, and that was actually the only piece on the recording that we recorded a year or two before the other pieces, because Tillman actually flew out from Germany and produced that recording for us.
Oh yeah. Well, it fits nicely into the rubric of this idea of colors, and in this case, paintings and light. And
right.
When you bring up the impressionism, also that definitely speaks to everything you've got going on with this music. Can you talk a little bit about, now, forgive my ignorance, but were you with the group from the beginning? Because I know you're celebrating your 40 years now as a touring ensemble, which is just remarkable. Yeah.
So Scott Tennant and John Dearman and I are original members. So we actually been playing together for 42 years, but we sort of officially became the Los Angeles Guitar Quartet 40 years ago. And we've only had 3 members in the other chair, and Matt Greif, he's the new guy. He's only been with us for 16 years, so we're still breaking him in.
He's still a teenager.
Yeah, he's the rookie.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a remarkable achievement that we've been able to stay together. But we were buddies before we were professional bandmates. And I think the friendship and the kind of creative flow of the group, we're kind of like brothers, really, with all the wonderful parts and the challenging parts of sibling relationships, but when we step on stage, it's we kind of can just feed right into that 40-year reservoir of playing together, and it's still pretty special.
Well, and you've played such a wide variety of music, and you've had pieces written for you over the years. Uh, do your aesthetics kind of run the same? I mean, do you each bring something different to the group, or do you sort of agree on what the mission is of LAGQ?
I think it's a nice balance. We each have our own kind of, likes and dislikes. We have our own aesthetics, and sometimes they can be at cross purposes, and then sometimes we can all align. And I think that, that having a few different hands on the on the rudder here is actually a good thing, because we steer clear of the shoals of completely contemporary music that's going to put people off, and we hopefully veer around overly pop classic, like pandering stuff. And you know but ultimately we're trying to not think of it so calculatedly, like that we want to do stuff that some people like but don't people like. Ideally we want to do music that we just really like and that makes
Yeah,
us feel happy. And I think that's one of the threads in this piece. Just all these pieces kind of bring a kind of sense of joy and light to
yeah,
us.
absolutely. And it's a wonderful story of collaboration, which you don't see that often with groups that last as long as yours has. Um, Now that you're one of the first guitarists that I've talked to in a situation like this, I have a question I've always wanted to ask
Yeah.
of guitarists, so I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
Um, can you tell me about your instrument, the actual guitar itself? Because I talk to a lot of violinists, and they're very particular about the instruments they play. I'm wondering, do you have like a closet full of guitars and you decide which one you're going to play that night, or do you have a go-to guitar? How does that work?
Hold on. Here it
Excellent.
is.
You read
So
my mind.
I know. Well, it just got off the plane, so it's
Uh,
I don't know what the sound's like right now, but we all play standard classical guitar, nylon string. Um, all of us have handmade instruments that made by a particular builder. This one is I own about 6 guitars, but I tend to be a somewhat um, uh, monogamous guitarist. I tend to play one guitar at a time. You know what? You're gonna have to hold on 2 seconds because my computer just told me that I'm almost out of battery. So I
oh,
just have
okay.
to plug in this thing,
Oh,
and I'll be right back.
not a
Sorry.
problem.
We are good.
All
Okay.
right.
Okay. The show will go on. Um, but this was made by a builder in the Frankfurt area named Gernot Wagner. And so, each of us in the quartet, though, have our own instrument that we love, that we're playing. We don't. Some groups might have one builder make a matched set of instruments, like string quartets. Sometimes they all have amatis or something. Um, but we just play what we love. But we all play standard classical guitars, except John Dearman has always had a specially made 7-string guitar. It has an extra string
Mm,
and with a little bass extension. So his guitar has a lower range. He can go about a fifth lower than all of our other guitars. But the high end classical guitar played with the nails, it does create a kind of, hopefully, a warmth, a sort of singing quality. But I always like to think, though, that the guitar is capable of so many colors. It's not just what people think of as, like, it's just strumming. I didn't know I was going to play. I haven't tuned up yet. Here we go. Okay, that's better. You know, but
Listening to you tune is just a treat in itself. So,
but depending on how you play, you can either get very, very bright. There's this incredibly wide range of just color of plucked tone. The guitar can be a percussion instrument. There's all kinds of pizzicato and harmonics, special sounds that can pop out of the guitar, and so that's one of the things that we've really explored, like making the guitar imitate other instruments. When we've done our world music projects, doing Indonesian music and African music and things like that. So I think it's very well suited to a project like this because of the potential for color. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
there you go.
And you hear so much of that in the music. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that little impromptu performance.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Guitarist William Kanengiser, who is one of the members of the Los Angeles Guitar Quartet. The album is called Opalescent, and people can find it anywhere that you get, your albums. And they can also find out a whole lot of information about this wonderful group at your website, which is LAGQ.com, right?
That's it. That's us.
Yeah. Easy to remember.
Yeah.
William, thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations on the wonderful music. And thanks for 40 years of making great music that we all love and enjoy.
I appreciate it. Thank you.